Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Lewis, and welcome back to my channel. So, just like everybody else in the wonderful world of BookTube, I'm going to be doing my August what I read. So here we go. We'll do it by fiction and non-fiction. So first up, Airman by Eoin Colfer. I think I talked about this at the start of the month. Not too sure. Brain has sort of left the building. Honestly, this one, I've read it before. It was great coming back to it. I personally think it's Eoin Colfer's best work. Sorry, Artemis Fowl, but also Artemis Fowl movie. Yeah. I'd love a sequel to this. I don't think it will. For those of you who are not familiar with this, I'll read you the blurb. So, one dark night on the island of Great Saltee, 14-year-old Connor is framed for a terrible crime he didn't commit. Thrown into prison by the dastardly Hugo Bonvillian, Connor is trapped in a sea-swept dungeon and branded a traitor. He must escape and clear his name. He wants his old life back, his family, his friends, and his princess. Connor knows there is only one way out. It's an impossible task that has never been done before, but Connor is determined to do it. He'll have to fight. It's a fun, ahistorical adventure about human flight and revenge. That's always fun. It is a kid's book, but it's very much pushing kids to from the boundary of kids to young adult sort of fiction. Next up, we have What Abigail Did That Summer, the Ben Aaronovitch novella. That is the most recent one to come out. Big fan of Aaronovitch, as I've no doubt talked about on this channel. It was good. Scratched the itch. Still waiting for book, I think, number 9. Any news about that? That would be lovely, Mr. Aaronovitch. I didn't really enjoy Abigail as a character until I read this, which is always good. Plus, it had the Nightingale, because everyone loves the Nightingale. Then we have BookTube's favourite book of the last year or so. I think one of them anyway. We had Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Talked about this in the previous video, I believe. My favourite story was the one at the end, with the time travel to the future and the past. I think it's a really interesting approach. I would have loved to see this as the stage play. Hopefully it'll come to Sydney. If Sydney ever gets out of lockdown, which seems unlikely, we just hit another day of record cases, up to 1,500 for the last 24 hours, which is fun. I'm excited to read the next one. Not sure when I'll do that. Don't have any money, pretty much. Bought too many books in lockdown. Then we have Terminal Boredom by Izumi Suzuki. Now, I found this book when I was going through the upcoming releases at work in terms of sci-fi, when I was still able to work. And it's got some really, really bonkers stories. So it's all very much about connection and what it is to be a person. And there's stuff woman to woman. Sorry, is it woman to woman or women and women? I think is great. It's about this queer matriarchal utopia in which men are basically kept in this containment facility, and our main character sees this young boy walking along the streets at night, and it's all very confusing to her. And it's really interesting. And I've not read loads of Japanese science fiction or even sci-fi light, because there's only so much you can do and work with a novella. But it was really cool, so if that sounds up your alley, I'd highly recommend it. Then we have Contacts by Mark Watson. As I've said before, this book was good, except for the last chapter. Damn you, Mark Watson. I'm probably going to read the rest of his stuff, but hopefully he can end a book better, because, I don't know. I think it could have been, telegraphed more, but I suppose, I don't know. Many thoughts. If you read the book, let me know, please. I need someone to talk about it, because no one I know has read the book. Then we also have The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the lovely, lovely edition illustrated by Chris Riddell. Oh, what I'd give for Chris Riddell. Pretty much this month it's been kind of terrible. I'll be honest. I've found myself just in a bit of a reading slump, like compared to the last few, or every month this year, really. This is the least amount of books that I've read. I think I did 14, 15. I mean, for regular people, like other people, that's a lot, but for me, that's sort of it's a pissy effort. I'll be honest. So I've pretty much been just finding some comfort reads or just stuff that is, I don't know, just not too difficult, not too heavy. He says, looking at his part of non-fiction that he's going to talk about. But yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide, it's a classic for a reason. Recently was chatting to someone and they were arguing, well, they were going to teach, because they're a high school teacher, that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy can be argued as a post-apocalyptic novel. So when I hear a bit more about that, I will get back to you because that seems very exciting. And as a result of the Chris Riddell and the whole comfort reads, I've gone back to rereading the Edge Chronicles. I haven't got all of them yet. I've read them all, haven't got them all yet. I was going to do a big second-hand book purchase, but some bills came up, so I'll have to wait till October, maybe. But yeah, I think the Quint books, so the sort of prequel series, are my favourites. I'm not going to talk about this one too much because it is the second in a series, and just in case you haven't read them, I don't want to spoil them for you, but they're really wholesome and nice, and they push the boundaries in terms of what you can work with in terms of kids fiction, and they're just really nice. And then my friend, who works in the competing bookstore in the centre, when the centre is open, finally got me reading Nevermore, Trials of Morrigan Crow, and her dad, also Crow. Apart from the naming, for a while I didn't enjoy this one too much. It took me till like page 400 to really kick in, and this one, it's like not even 500 pages, so it's a bit of a worry. But then, like, after page 400, I was hooked. I was reading this at strange hours. My sleep schedule was scuppered. I was starting to go to bed at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., just because, why not? Yeah, it's good. I don't know if I'll read the sequels, probably, just to know what everyone is talking about. I don't think it is at that Harry Potter level that it has been touted at. I think there's just something missing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just the wrong generation to be reading this. Maybe I'm not a child anymore, and that sense of magic has gone. Who knows? Anyway, fiction. Well, fiction's done. Non-fiction time. So we have one of my go-to reads when it's just been an absolutely awful day. Quiet Girl in a Noisy World by Debbie Tung. It's subtitled An Introvert Story. It's pretty much Debbie Tung dealing with how being an introvert, and it's just a series of short little vignettes. The illustration style is, it's simple in a really understated way, and I think that's really cool. Yeah, it was good. I've read this 5 or 6 times. Don't know why, I just keep coming to it. I've got all her books. I think she's just she's really good, and she really gets it. Which, I mean, not that she needs my praise or anything. She's a published author, and I'm just some guy talking to a camera. Next up, we have Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. As mentioned, both Ruby Granger and Amy Reeds convinced me to go out and buy this. Most of this stuff in here, as I've mentioned, I'm aware of. I've been a vegan for almost 2 years now. But yeah, I think people should read this. I'd love to see a more updated version of this, either by Foer or by someone else, or, as I think I mentioned last video, you can tell my brain's just switched off. An Australian version, because a lot of this is very American-centric, which is good in a way because America is huge on the stage of like global pollutants and eating meat, but it can be a bit of a disconnect because, you know, you don't have that sense of knowing when compared to Australian stuff. But yeah, it was good. It's a good book to read if you're considering going plant-based or vegetarian or vegan. There are others. I can talk about others if you want me to. I am ultimately a servant to you, audience. We also have Delisle's Shenzhen, Travelogue from China. This one was written, I think 2001 was when it got published. So it is quite dated in terms of, what China is now compared to what it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I think a lot of the holdovers do come across, for all intents and purposes. And, even though we are arguing towards a globalization, even though we are heading towards a globalized world, there are still massive cultural differences between the West and China. And whilst this video is not going to be talking about that, it's really interesting to see the outside perspective of someone who has worked in other countries, like Delisle has. And just, it's sort of like seeing the outsider's journey. So if someone who's lived in China read this, they'd be like, yeah, no dramas. So it's like the opposite of, when Frantz Fanon went from the French colony to live in Paris. I don't know what I'm saying with this. I just think Delisle is really good. If you haven't read him, you should read him. The art style's great. And yeah, not his strongest, but still good. Then we have The Road to Sata, 2,000-mile walk through Japan. Just talked about last week, so bought it. Yeah, my plan was when I graduate uni to do the Shikoku pilgrimage. That doesn't seem likely because I'm skint and the world is in lockdown. At least Sydney is, where I'm based. So it looks like I will not be able to do that. So this was a fun way to live vicariously through the walk. Yeah, Japan, it's fascinated me for a while. I've been doing karate for almost 20 years now. So, I've always had that sort of interest in Japan. So, yeah, I will be reading his other one when I have money. And if there's any other travelogues for me to read, or you think I'd like, send them my way. I'm happy to read anything and everything, as long as it's not Mills and Boon. For those, you got to pay me. Next up, we have Outrage by Ashley Dotty Charles. I've got a friend in Leeds, and we talk politics a lot. It is what it is. I need someone to talk about politics sometimes that isn't just Australian-based. I think this one is really good. It's very similar to So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It was just because I read both of them in the space of 2 months, a lot of the points raised were just quite similar. This one is much more geared towards the fact of the online cycle of outrage and all that jazz that goes down on Twitter, which is a cesspool. But yeah, I think if you're engaging in online discourse or you have any interest in, I think this is a fun read. It's only short, so it shouldn't take you too long. I think I smashed it out in an evening. So yeah. Then we have them. Speaking of Jon Ronson, Adventures with Extremists. This is, as with Delisle's work, a dated piece of media, only because extremism is just bandied around so much nowadays. And the way that we view extremism has been changed. And yeah, it was good. It was good, don't get me wrong, but I think the stuff about the Bilderberg group, as I said last week, was a little bit sus. I'm not going to talk about Epstein's private island. It's not my place. But yeah, I think it'd be really good if Ronson or someone else came back and did it because of the way that extremism is viewed, especially online. And then finally, we have Perfect Sound Whatever by James Acaster. My original plan was, when I was reading this at the start of the year, was to listen to the albums as they came along. Because instead of being really split into chapters, per se, it's split into how each album relates to the piece of memoir Acaster is writing about. This lasted about 3 weeks, mostly because I'd be listening to an album and then or a series of albums, and I wouldn't be vibing all of them. And then I'd want to go back to my music and I'd lose my place. And eventually I just gave up on that and I sat down and read it because I'm a big fan of James Acaster. His comedy style is really, really good. It really works for me. And yeah, it was a fun read. Big shout out to Montaigne who got in there. Big Sydney girl. Yeah, it was a good read. Good comfort read. Took my mind off the frankly depressing state that was August for me personally. So here we go, bang on to September. I'm not sure what I'm going to read this month. I've just been reading Edge Chronicles so far. Done 3 in 4 days, which is, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And I'm sure I'll let you know. Anyway, that's all from me today. I'll see you next time.